right, perfect. Well, for those of you that know hemp, that know Jan, the handsome guy on the right there, it's tough to compete with his just sheer raw energy and passion for hemp. So I thought I'd compete on a much more superficial level. This is going to be the Farming Smarter Hemp Showdown. So cast your vote. Remember, only one of us is in the room here today when you're voting. So I'm just going to start out by giving you a quick overview of the hemp program that we did. We were part of a program with two other groups led by Jan. The first is up in Sarda here, and I thought it was interesting to point out we're comparing very different things when we look at the hemp agronomics in these regions. So Khalil in Sarda here, they've got 116 frost-free days. Their longest day is on the summer solstice, obviously. It's 17 hours and 41 minutes long. But unfortunately in 2015 they were plagued with some drought. They had flooding the next year and they had some hail this year, so maybe not the best data set from them. For Jan and Vegerville, they've got 115 frost-free days. Their longest day is only 17 hours 3 minutes, and for the most part these two sites are all under dry land with a little bit of water, like opposite issues with the water logging for them. We're really different down here in the south. All of our trials were run under irrigation, so keep that in mind. Before we started this project, we had a little precursor variety trial year, and we did that out at Ken's place, both under dry land and irrigation, and saw just really dramatic yield effects for the irrigation, so we chose to go that way. We've got 124 frost-free days down here in Lethbridge, but our longest day is only 16 hours and 19 minutes, so that's a full hour and a half less daylight come summer solstice. So really kind of different growing environments, and I'm just going to focus on the Lethbridge data. So if you grow hemp somewhere else in the province, probably best to ignore my entire presentation. So I changed the title of my presentation after I talked with Jan a little bit, and I changed it to What the Hemp Do I Know? And the reason I changed it to that was when we started this project, we really didn't know anything about growing hemp. I mean, none of us had grown it before. I hadn't even met anybody who had grown hemp. So in a matter of 3 years, we've acquired a lot of data and a lot of information on hemp, and it's pretty exciting to be able to share that with you. So a little bit about me. I'm Mike. I'm the research coordinator here. Fun facts, I like to ride my vintage motorcycle. I don't like to fix it. I like the amber glasses. If you don't wear those on a cloudy day, that's going to flip your world upside down. I got a new little boy that we just had. He's almost 2, and I'm a little bit of an amateur Photoshop artist, as you may find out. So when I started to think about why do we grow hemp, I got a little bit existential at first, and I really got back to, you know, why do we care about growing anything? Because I don't have a background in ag. I grew up in the city. But what excites me about these things is just their uses and possibilities. So why am I excited about something like growing canola? Well, I use canola all the time. I use it for cooking and stuff like that. Why am I excited about growing pulses? Because I love to eat pulses because they taste delicious when you cook them with a little bit of bacon. Why am I excited about wheat? I love baking and bread and everything about it, and ditto for beer. So when I thought about why am I excited about growing hemp, well hemp has a really amazing industry, and it's one of the most amazing kind of industries that there is because there's so many applications. It's not limited to a very specific niche like a lot of crops. So down on the bottom right, that's where most of the industry's focused now. That's on the grain market, the hemp hearts, the health foods. I use that Dr. Bronner's stuff. There's some granola bars and hemp oils and lotions and things like that. But up in the industrial side, I'm pretty excited. I'm building a detached garage at my house. I was hoping to build it out of hempcrete, which is probably not ever going to happen. But you know, different industrial applications that are slowly making their way to common industry. So it'll be really interesting once that happens. And then on the left side, something that's really kind of important and speaks to kind of Joe's presentation this morning. There's a lot of misinformation on chemicals and how they're used. So especially with the legalization of recreational marijuana in Canada Day next year, it's going to be really important to kind of distinguish these things, especially for people who don't understand. So if anybody asks you about this, it's really important to kind of know, you know, recreational marijuana's got a THC content 10 to 30%, and that's a psychoactive kind of property. Our industrial hemp that we do, it's all below, I think, 0.03%. but it's got a higher CBD content, and that's a consequence of them breeding that THC out. Something's got to kind of come in and take its place. So a lot of that's happened with CBD, and there's a little picture I took in the field there. You can see the crystals, and I think the black market value for that is like just astronomical, $10,000 an ounce or something like that, but I'm just making that number up. But it's really important to distinguish the two. So I found this off leafscience.com. And this is probably the worst place to find it. Don't tell Joe. But the idea and the concept that I wanted to share was basically they bind differently, and it's just showing you that CBD has a different mechanism of working, and that's the whole reason behind why they think it affects people differently. So it's you know, I actually find out every time I mention it. Somebody new I know is using CBD to treat chronic illness, chronic pain, chronic disease, something like that, and it's actually becoming really quite common. So it'll be interesting to see just how mainstream that becomes and what kind of scientific and medical research we can do when it comes to CBD. And in case I haven't made the distinction between the two clear, I've got this picture of our summer crew out in the field here. This is THC, being goofy, a little crazy, whatever. And then this is CBD, the calming, relaxation, you know, kind of state. So I thought those were good. Like I said, it's really easy to find the misinformation and conspiracies and stuff like that with hemp, so you just have to be careful if you're looking something up online. Really be careful where you find it from. Most of the data and the facts and the background stuff that I found came from like Hemp Trade Alliance, specialists in a province like Jan, different folks like that who really know what they're talking about, not probably Leaf Science or something like that. So to start off, you know, when we started this agronomy project, we had to ask, what do we know about growing hemp? Because this was a brand new endeavor for all of us at Farming Smarter. So we knew that it needed to be seeded shallow, sensitive to compaction and crusting, stuff like that. We knew there was going to be limited herbicides, but hopefully we were told we weren't going to need them, although we had pretty much never grown crops without herbicides. Cultivation was going to be nice, both for organic weed control and seedbed prep, so that's a practice that we definitely did. We were going to have to pick the right cultivars, and then we just told some fun facts. This is some college students we had in to thresh biomass. Hemp fiber is very strong. It was going to cause us problems with our combine, problems cutting through it with our size and sickles. And we were also told that not to worry about it, we can seed it after all the rest of our research crops. So that was kind of a nice relief to know we could get the rush of everything else over with and then worry about the hemp later. So we had 3 different agronomy trials that we ran. We've got a seeding date trial, a variety trial, and a hemp fertility trial. And I'm going to start giving you some info on the variety trial. Just so you know, our background fertility was about 50 to 100 pounds an acre at N. To kind of maximize things, we added 100 pounds per acre N and threw down 40 pounds per acre of FOS just to keep it from being limiting. So the conventional wisdom with hemp varieties are that they're going to be very regionally specific, which we found big differences between the Sarda, Vegreville, and Lethbridge varieties. They're going to be monoecious or dioecious, meaning there's going to be a separate female and male plant, or they're going to have the male-female parts on the exact same plant, which is important for flowering. And then they're going to fall into a couple really important categories. So the first one is grain, and a staple of that I'm going to talk about throughout the presentation is finola. And that's the kind of the one that looks kind of ugly there. All the friends and family would be like, what is that crop that's just kind of like, I don't know what it is, and it's kind of goofy and wavy, and it's probably because it was a hemp field. A dual purpose variety, this X59, is really characteristic, kind of UFO-shaped head on it, and it's really easy to pick out of the crowd. This one's kind of got the best of both worlds, pretty decent biomass, but also a good grain yield. And then this is our Salacia, our biomass variety. I mean, it's not that drastic, but there's a picture of Ken earlier in the season. It's towering, and it does pose some challenges for us. So if you choose the wrong variety, this is what happens. We got it spun up around our combine a whole bunch of times with the Salacia, and it just kind of goes to show you the difficulty. All the other varieties we were able to harvest with our new plot combine, but the Salacia caused problems, and we ended up actually changing the protocol throughout the project. So I thought I'd start by just explaining this concept of harvest index. What it is basically your seed yield divided by your total biomass. and that gives you a ratio of how much proportion you have seed yield. And why that's important is a lot of other crops have been bred to have a really high harvest index, meaning most of the nutrients and most of the things going into the crop are actually going to produce a seed yield as opposed to producing other things you may not need. Well, in the case of hemp, you may actually want a low harvest index if you're growing it for fiber, but in our cases, most of it's for grain, so it'd be better if you can get a higher harvest index. So we found the harvest index to be 0.27, although it varied greatly depending on a number of factors that we'll get into here. So what this is the yields of our entire variety trial. That doesn't show up very good, but I'm just going to focus on the three colorful ones anyway. So the finola, you'll see the very top lighter colored portion is the fiber biomass, and the lower darker colored portion is the seed yield. So I just combine them to give you can compare the varieties for total biomass as well as the two individuals. So you see I put the harvest index up there. Finola is 0.37, that was our highest harvest index for hemp. And that's because it's got the lowest tonnage for fiber, and that makes it really good to combine. And we didn't have any problems harvesting it. And something like Salacia's got a harvest index of 0.18. So to zoom in on that bottom section now, the darker colored portion will give us just our grain yield. So that's what we did here, and we found that actually despite all the differences in these hemp varieties, when we averaged them over our 3 site years in Lethbridge, they weren't as different as we expected to find. So there is a few significant differences. I think the CFX2, CRS1, and X59, maybe Grandma 2 were slightly different than some of the lower ones. But I wouldn't use this as the sheer indicator of variety performance. So if you're going to grow hemp right away next year, don't look at this and go, oh, okay, I'm not going to grow finola. Because you'll see we kind of got this strange thing in some other trials where the finola did better than the Salacia or equal to the X59. So a few explanations for why this variety trial maybe wasn't the best predictor. And then what we did was I just combined 2015, 16, 17. So you can see 2015 was a pretty good growing year, and 2016 was maybe our best yields. 2017, all the varieties were just lower. You know, despite what we did, we kept them under irrigation, we kept the fertility high, but they didn't grow as well as we were hoping. But overall, they kind of stayed between that 1,500 kgs and 2,000 kgs per hectare. So pretty happy with that. So to summarize the varieties, the harvest index, or basically the purpose of why you're growing hemp, is going to be your critical consideration. Now, there's no sense going with a massive biomass variety if you don't intend to bale all your straw or do something with it later. Hemp's not yet at the point of barley wheat classification, so the varieties aren't broken out into very specific, this is for milling, this hemp's for granola bars, this hemp's for soap or whatever, it's pretty open still. And basically all varieties perform well in Lethbridge under irrigation, and it may not be that the variety is actually your biggest contributor to yield, as we'll see. So our fertility trial, what we did was we had tried to keep the background N low, and then we looked at 6 different rates of fertility. So the conventional wisdom with our fertility trial was that the hemp it can grow organically, so it doesn't need fertilizer. And if you put fertilizer, it may just grow more and more and more biomass and may not contribute much to yield. Ideally, though, hemp is going to need about 200 kgs per hectare total N. So that means if we had 50 to 100 background, we're probably going to add 100 to 150 extra N, should give us optimal yields. So these are just some pictures we took, all in the same day, and you can see pretty evidently that yes, adding N really contributes to the increase in biomass. It's also going to show what happens with the grain yield. So the plant biomass is the light-colored seed, just like before, and the seed yield's the dark stuff. And you can see we had a really good response for all 3 different crops. The Salacia's really shows that 150 is probably way more N than it needed for seed yield, but really just kind of kept pumping out the biomass. It'd be interesting to see, exactly how high we could go before that comes back down. So I thought that was pretty neat. And if we zoom back in on the yields again specifically, you'll see we get some nice kind of stereotypical curves. So in the case of the Finola, we got a really good response here to our added nitrogen. Salacia tapered off a little sooner, maybe at 60 kgs per hectare. And then the X59, it bumped all the way up to about 90 before things started to kind of level off. So we figured maybe we'd do a little bit of a hemponomic analysis. I took a different approach from the standard kind of economist route, only because I'm not an economist, and I think it's kind of unfair to go back in after and say, here's all the money you could have made if you did it perfect. So I went, here's our kgs per hectare. Here's, I just went with $700 per ton. And here's how much it's going to cost you to grow a quarter section of hemp. And so it's about $1,000, $1,300 every time you add another 30 kgs per hectare. So then what I did was I calculated, well, it's 77 cents per pound. Given the yields that we got, or sorry, this is before yield, 77 cents per pound, how many kgs per hectare, how many bushels per acre increase would we need in our yield to justify that additional fertilizer? And it turned out to be surprisingly low. 1.8 bushels per acre is all we needed to justify adding that additional hemp to get the net benefit of adding the fertilizer. So if I go back now and kind of do the ROI economist way, what you see is like in the blue there, we've got the Finola, and those are our actual yields in bushels per acre, 21, 23, 27, 34, 29, and 34. And so then what I did was I calculated an ROI, so I took the net revenues and then I subtracted the cost of the increments from going up from 0, and then I subtracted the cost of the fertilizer out of that too. So at 0 kgs per hectare, there's 0 net return in the amount of fertilizer, basically. At 30 kgs per hectare, you got a 4-to-1 payback on the amount of fertilizer you put down. At 60, you got a 9-to-1, and at 90, you got 5-to-1. So for most of these cases, between the 60 and 90 kgs per hectare, that's where you got maximum ROI. That doesn't mean that was your most profitable, that's just the ROI. It could turn out that the 120 or 150, because there's still a positive ROI, there's like it will accrue even further, but that just wasn't part of what I did here. So it's really neat to see though what happens. So in summary, for the fertility on hemp, it doesn't need N. In some cases, it may not pay to put N. All that extra biomass production, you may not want that. You may not want to deal with that. You may have certain markets that you don't need to put additional N, but it loves it. And you ideally want to hit that 200 kgs per hectare total N throughout the season. Any less is kind of just less than what you could potentially yield. PK and S we didn't measure. They're usually not limiting at our site in Lethbridge. Well, P we did, but K and S aren't usually limiting. And then our last trial is our seeding date trial, and this was probably the biggest surprise for everybody, because we were told, oh, you can push hemp off, don't worry about it till latest. Some guys don't seed it till June. So we were told like late June or early June, not until at least May long, but we decided with our seeding date trial that we were going to do 3 different dates. So we started one in early May, one the 3rd week in May, and then one at the early June. And that's how we decided which dates to go with. And if you look at each one, starting on the left, the Finola, the best yielding was the 3rd week in May. And then the Salacia, 3rd week in May. X59, early May. Finola, early May. Salacia, 3rd week in May, and then all the rest were early May again. And that kind of was really surprising to us, and especially there was some really big differences. I mean, one year the Salacia in early May obviously got hurt there in 2016, but in 2016 the early June really got hurt as well. It really paid the price for being seeded late, and you can see that, just like most of our other crops, seeding early did have a really big benefit, even with hemp, which we assumed we could get away with it. So these numbers on the bottom aren't quite in lowest to highest, but for each of the 3 years they are, and it just happened that we had the better yield in 2015, 16, and 17, so it's making a kind of a perfect line, but that's not quite how the line should look. I didn't realize that till later. But the idea here is that basically the Julian dates are down there on the bottom, and so that means the later that we're seeding in the season, the less yield potential that we have, and that just holds true to most of the other things that we know. So to summarize the seeding date, 6 of the 9 years, early May was our best yielding timing. The other 3 were the 3rd week in May, just basically around the May long, and none of the June seeded dates had the best yield. So our conventional wisdom was maybe wrong. I think that this, if it isn't in the ground, it's just not going to grow. And seeding date, in some cases, if you look at the yield differences, might have been just as or maybe more important than the variety you chose, or an extra 30 kgs per hectare of N either way. So kind of big finding, I think, there. Final consideration, this is the one thing that kind of popped up when I was mentioning that the variety trial didn't, some varieties didn't do as well as we thought. And I was thinking about, look at this picture, look how big and tall some varieties are, and if we zoom in, the plot in the middle there is probably a Finola, and the plot on the right is maybe the Salacia. And I think this was something that we didn't consider because we just did our standard randomized complete block design. But depending on the year, location, sun orientation, plot in the field and stuff, there could have actually been some shading effects, and we know edge effects and stuff like that are a factor in small plot research. And I wonder, just given the dramatic differences between varieties, if there wasn't some of this going on, kind of equivalent to that tall person standing in front of you at the concert or line or movie theater or whatever. So I think we're going to maybe do a bit of an analysis and look through the randomizations and see if we can't figure out if that did play some sort of factor. And then further research, actually we just got, I think I just got a letter the other day saying it looks like we're good to go on a new project that's going to look at some hemp within some other rotations. So that'll be really interesting to see what we do moving forward. A big thanks to our crew for doing all the field work. And I got a final tongue twister to leave you with. See if you can say that 10 times fast or figure out what it's supposed to mean. Thank you.